everyone, it's Cass. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna kick off my week of some 2019 wrap-up videos by bringing you my most disappointing reads of 2018. Did I say 2019 wrap-up videos? I meant my 2018 wrap-up videos. So that's a great way to start off this video. These weren't like the very worst things that I've read. I actually didn't have that many books that I felt that strongly about. I think my 2017 worst books of the year, those were some true books that I was just like, oh no, these are horrible, these are awful. These are just some books that disappointed me for whatever reason. Some of them I don't even have in my house anymore because I've decided to unhaul them, and then I've got two books that I've still kept around. So the first book that I want to talk about, this is The Last Wish, written by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is book number 1 of the Witcher series. This is a collection of short stories meant to set us up and introduce us to the characters leading into the Witcher series. I have a full review of this on my channel. The reason why I'm disappointed in this book is I feel like I had been set up for something that I wasn't receiving from this book. This is a series of short stories, again, introducing these main characters to set you up for the main series. My husband plays the video game, and I was anticipating something a little bit more gritty than what this delivered. This read to me like grim fairy tales, which is fine if you were expecting that, and that's not what I was expecting at all. Some of the short stories I enjoyed. A lot of them I just kind of skimmed through, and so I did end up rating this 2 stars. On Goodreads. I just said I just didn't get it. Alright, the next book that I no longer own. Alright, so this is I Hear Your Voice, written by Young Ha Kim. I read this because I was going to venture into the Around the World in 100 Pages book club led by Russell from Ink and Paper blog, and his goal was to read a book from every continent starting in January. So the first book that I read for that book club was great. You'll see it later in this week's worth of videos, but this one I wasn't a fan. So this was a book that took place in South Korea. It followed 2 young boys. One of the boys was a self-selected mute, and they grew up together. This book was also told in 5 different parts, and the first part of the book I really loved because it told the story of how these 2 boys met and their upbringing and their friendship when they grew up. And then the second part switched. Like, the first part of the book was told in 3rd person. The second part of the book switched to 1st person perspective, flipping back and forth between the 2 boys. And things got very dark very fast. And I did end up DNF'ing this book, probably around 25 to 30% of it, because I just couldn't get past some of the atrocities that were happening around these boys. They were in their teenage years, and to be honest, the reason why I DNF'd it was there were child abuse and gang rape happening, and I was like, I cannot, you lost me. Alright, the next disappointing book that I have is Obsidio, written by Kristoff and Amie Kaufman. It is book 3 of the Illuminae files. I did rate this 3 out of 5 stars, and I've unhauled this series already, but now I'm having like regrets because I loved Illuminae so much. TBD on what I do with that series, I don't know. But book 3 did end up disappointing me. Illuminae was a 5-star read, then Gemina was a 4-star read, and Obsidio ended up being a 3-star read. Still really enjoyable, still all the fast-paced action. I even got to see a little Aiden cameo here and there. But I just felt like for all the tension that we got to book 3, the story just lost some of its steam for me. The most disappointing thing for me was that it wrapped up a little too cleanly for all of the things that they encountered in books 1 and 2. There was still just so many really grim, dark things that were happening, and I don't know if it was like supposed to be for shock value, but there was just like nothing lasting that happened to these characters, and I feel like for the ringer that they put them through, they could have ended completely differently. The next most disappointed book of mine is Certain Dark Things, written by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This book was about Mexican vampire gangs in Mexico City, and I thought that was something that I'd never heard of before. This sounded really awesome. Vampires are not really supposed to do vampire activities inside Mexico City, so it's supposed to be kind of like this safe haven for humans, and then the rest of Mexico has been overrun. If the story had followed that from the beginning, I would have given it a way higher rating. I did end up DNF'ing this book because the book itself was probably less than 400 pages, and it had way too many character perspectives that I just couldn't really care enough about some of these characters because we just jump back and forth too much. I didn't even get to that much stuff about the conflict. After like more than 100 pages in, that's usually my DNF mark. So I was 30% of the way in and I had 2/3 of the book left to go, and I still didn't really feel like I was approaching any sort of plot or conflict. So that's why I ended up DNFing that one. And I was pretty bummed, pretty disappointed by that one because it just sounded so cool. And I did end up putting that in a 5-star TBR predictions video, so that goes to show that I had no good judgment on that book at all. All right, so the next book that I have that was the most disappointing for me, this is The Well of Ascension, written by Brandon Sanderson. This is book number 2 of the Mistborn trilogy. I do have a review of this on my channel. I was so disappointed in this one because I loved The Final Empire. I gave that one 5 stars. I was not emotionally ready after the ending of The Final Empire to continue with this. I was like mourning. I needed a moment. It like completely blew me out of the water. Everyone who I've spoken to who has read the Mistborn trilogy said, oh yeah, book 2 moves a little bit slower and it's a little bit more political. And I wish I had known that going into it, because I remember working through this book and I was like, well, I'm on page 400 and the like action that was promised to me still hasn't happened yet, and I just don't know what's going on. But this one definitely moves slower because, as I said in my review, but this book is, you know, we're in a siege situation, and sometimes when you're in a siege of a city, there's a lot of waiting. There's a waiting game that happens and a lot of the political maneuvering that goes on behind the scenes, and that's what this book was really about. It just didn't really capture my attention. I felt like the characters that we also focused on in this book didn't propel the plot forward either. They just didn't carry the same weight as Kelsier. I felt like Kelsier's energy is what really brought the crew together and made the characters gel, and then this book did not have that same kind of charisma, and I just really missed Kelsier a lot. But fear not, because I did end up finishing The Hero of Ages. That ended up being my very last read of 2018. I did give that 4 out of 5 stars. Not quite the 5-star that The Final Empire ended up being, but the series did redeem itself for me. I know a lot of people, when I did make the review and say some of the complaints that I had about it, they're like, well, you'll get your questions answered in the next book. And I'm like, but that's not what I'm critiquing this on. Like, yes, I'm left with way too many questions and I'm not happy about that. I also feel like even though you have knowledge of the whole complete series, to tell someone, oh, well, you'll get your questions answered in the next one, that's not really what the person wants to hear in the moment. Like, now that I know that I have my questions answered, I still agree with my assessment. The kinds of questions that I still had for The Well of Ascension, in particular some of the characters who show up at the very end of it, I don't understand why that had to wait until the 3rd book. Why some of the things, maybe Zane, our villain from The Well of Ascension, he wasn't really the villain, but he was the anti-hero. Some of the questions I had regarding him, that one I understand why that was pushed off till the 3rd book, but some of the other characters who came back right at the very end of The Well of Ascension, maybe that was for shock value, but I'm still unsure of why we had to hold off until the very end to get some of these different perspectives that gave those kinds of answers. That's just my thoughts on it. So anyways, that was The Well of Ascension, written by Brandon Sanderson. And the final disappointing book of 2018, you know the one because I've talked about it in a couple recent videos of mine. That is The Tiger's Daughter, written by Arsenault Rivera. This book I was really looking forward to. I don't know if I put it in my 5-star TBR prediction. I probably did. Because this was this Mongolian fantasy setting, this matriarchal warrior society. It told the story of 2 women who were raised together and they ended up falling in love, so Shefali and Shizuka. 2 different parts of this Hokurin fictional empire. Now, the reason why I did DNF this book was because it was Asian representation, it was lesbian representation on the page, but it doesn't mean that it was good representation for me as an Asian woman. There were some things in there that made me really uncomfortable as I was reading it, a lot of cultural insensitivity. Arsenault Rivera, the author, is a lesbian author, so I do feel like she speaks true to the experiences for Shizuka and Shefali in that regard, but as far as being an Asian woman, even though Arsenault Rivera is Puerto Rican and she is a woman of color and a minority woman of color, she just didn't completely understand some of the cultural sensitivities for an Asian woman. You know, as time wore on in that book, I just kept getting hit over the head with several of these instances of being called rice tongue, rice eater, of being called flat-faced, and just some of the Asian fetishization that it still permeates in society today that I didn't really appreciate. I DNF'd it, won't be continuing with that series. Got it out of my house because I don't even want to look at it anymore. And I feel like it's really important for me to mention that because it just wasn't well done. So that was my final disappointing read of 2018. As my reading journey progressed this year, I got more comfortable with the idea of DNFing a book because I have so many books that I just want to read, and I really don't want to waste my time with continuing with something that isn't working for me. That's just my opinion on DNFing books, and you have your own opinions. If you don't like to DNF, if you really feel like you want to pursue through a book, that's completely your choice. I just don't want to waste time with it. So that's why you have some DNFs in that pile. But anyways, let me know your thoughts on these books below. Were you surprised by any of them? Were you expecting some of them? I'm sure you were. And then did you have some differing opinions on some of these books as well? I'd love to hear your comments on that. If you want to, you can follow me on my social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, so that's gonna be at whatcassread. It's written the same as this channel, all one word, so it should be super easy to find for you. And then of course, I'm also on Goodreads, so that link is always listed down below. Stay tuned this week because you're also going to get my 5-star reads of 2018 as well as my 2018 book awards at the very end of the week. So I hope you'll stay tuned and that you are looking forward to these videos as much as I love filming them. Otherwise, you know how these videos end. I'll talk to you later. Bye.